I am your host, Nicole Will, and we're so happy you're here as we navigate the world with your aging loved one. We are here to come alongside older adults, family members, and the senior living community as we explore the world of aging and elder care with helpful resources, informative interviews, and approachable conversation. We get to do this together, so join us on our journey, and this is the willGather podcast. There are many ways that caregiving transforms our lives. As women, we are always in a balancing act, whether it's balancing our career, potentially being parents, and caring for our loved ones that are older. My guest today is Liz O'Donnell. She is the founder of WorkingDaughter. She's created a community for women that are balancing all of the things: elder care, career, and more. She is an award-winning writer. Her book, WorkingDaughter, A Guide for Caring for Your Aging Parents While Earning a Living, was named one of the best books of the year by Library Journal. Liz is a former family caregiver, and she is often recognized as an expert on working while caregiving. Liz has written on the topic for many different outlets, including The Atlantic, Harvard Business Review. She's been featured in the Wall Street Journal, Oprah Magazine, and more. Liz and I had the opportunity to meet at the Care Colloquium. Today, Liz and I talk about WorkingDaughter and the honesty and those real emotions that we feel when we're caring for others, how we juggle work and care, knowing that we need that support, how we go from victim to boss. What is the caregiver's gain that we actually do experience in this world? Complicated relationships, family dynamics. How do we redefine those relationships? And planning over time, where do we determine what needs come first and where to invest our time? And where is the support? And how can those employers offer support to women in the workforce? What impact does this have on us and how we can disrupt the system? We have a really good conversation today talking about all of the things and what really resonated for me in her new book. Here is my interview with Liz O'Donnell. Hi, Liz. How are you? Thank you for
Hi.
conversation with me today. I've been looking forward to this.
Thank you. Me too.
I believe so. We had a chance to meet at the Care Colloquium, and I wanted to spend more time with you. You were doing some really cool things, especially with National Working Daughters Day. But I was podcasting from there, and I felt like I didn't have the chance to spend a ton of time with everyone as much as I wanted. So I'm glad we get to have more conversation now.
Me too. That was an incredible event. I was really blown away by the excitement and the quality of people and all the amazing caregiving solutions that are out there. It was really heartwarming and inspiring.
As I walked away, my heart was so full. I felt like I had this new community. I was just telling someone, when you're a solo entrepreneur, sometimes you feel like you're kind of just on your own island doing the work. And I left there feeling like, oh, now I've got this almost like coworkers, like team of people that now I can.
I know. And what we're
Yeah.
solving for is so important. And sometimes I feel like, is anyone listening? And then when I met everybody else who was doing the same or similar work, I was like, oh, good, we're making noise.
I know. It's so true. First thing is that I wanted to let you know I read your book,
Thanks.
and I enjoyed it so much. In fact, I read it in one sitting because how you write, the wittiness that you have, the honesty, it was packed with good information, just like practically, but then also I felt like you challenged us to reconsider like how we think through things in our caregiving. So I'm going to take a page literally out of your book and
Wow.
ask you, what is good for you right now?
It's good for me right now. I was actually just had a coaching call last night with one of the members of the Working Daughter community. We have a membership option for people who want, more access, more information than they can get on the Facebook page or on the website or through the book. And she was asking me what I thought about caregiving on the other side of it. And so that was making me consider what's good. And what's good is that I feel aware of my strength. I feel really good about how I showed up as a caregiver. And I know it's easy to sort of be on the other side, and I don't want to sound like Pollyanna, but there's research that I write about in the book called The Caregiver's Gain. And it shows that caregivers compared to non-caregivers have all these incredible benefits like better cognitive ability, physical strength, sense of self-esteem. And what I love about the research is the two professors who did the research have also done a whole bunch of research on the caregiver stress and burden. And so this study isn't negating that all of those things happen, weight gain, blood pressure, stress, anxiety, but that on the other side, there's this real upside and benefit. And so I'm definitely feel like I'm living proof. So
Yeah,
that's good.
I'm glad you mentioned that. And we do tend to focus on all of the things that aren't working, right? Or more of the negative. And I appreciated that you pulled out what are some of those, the upside, and just that we can have so many blessings and lessons within all of it. So that was, thank
Yeah.
you for doing that. Yeah.
And I think it's
While
like exercise.
acknowledging,
So sorry to
yeah.
cut you off,
Oh,
but
no, I was,
I think it's like exercise. And maybe if more caregivers knew as they were going through it that there is actually this upside, then maybe it'll make it just that much better as you go through it. Kind of like getting up at 5 a.m. and getting on the
right.
treadmill or whatever, and it's miserable, but you do it because you know you're going to have felt good for having done it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
completely. I know I always say like I'm going to be so proud of the future Nicole that I honored that commitment to honored the commitment to myself. I so today I'm going to share with you some things that I pulled out that resonated with me that I want to talk through because I want to hear your lens on it, and I want people to read the book to get more because there's such a bigger story and so much more detail. It's like, how do we sum up our whole lives, in a conversation? That's hard to
Right.
do. But first, your story has, your mom and your dad, and you're juggling work and care. Can you just tell us a little bit about what that was like for you and just kind of like set the stage for us of what your life was like when you were kind of in it in those moments?
It was hell.
Yeah.
There it's summed up. It was hell.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was the sole breadwinner in my marriage. So I was really into my career. I had a high pressure job in public relations. So that's, service job, billable hours, all that stuff. But also wanted to be really, present and hands-on mom with kids who, did all the usual, suburban stuff like soccer and dance recitals and
Which
you
takes a
know,
lot of time. I've got
which
kids that age, and I'm like, I am spending hours a week driving, which I love, right? But it's like, how do you, yeah, a lot going on.
Yeah. And my first book is called Mogul Mom and Maid. And it's about the fact that women, regardless of who works and who doesn't, do more housework and childcare than men. And I refer to it as the chore gap, and really the invisible tasks that women do. Like we're the ones who realize like, oh, winter's coming and there was they outgrew their snow boots, or soccer's coming and they don't have the right size cleats, or permission slips are due, right? All that little
Oh my
stuff that
gosh, you're right. Yes,
yeah,
all of
yeah.
it.
So I had, written a book about that, and I was living that as well. I mean, my husband did the lion's share of everything, which was why I was able to write the book, because I wasn't really talking about us. So, but I was really busy and, never really pressed for time. Had just published my first book, wanted to be out there promoting it, loved, going out and speaking to groups of mothers and women's conferences, and feeling like I never had enough time, always feeling pressed for time. And my parents were in their 80s and they lived about an hour away, and they just started to need a little more and a little more and a little more. And I call that's what I reference in the book as the caregiving creep. It's when caregiving just sort of starts to creep up on you and you don't even notice it, because it's not, nobody had a diagnosis. They weren't moving in with me. It wasn't any one big thing. It was a million little things the way you were like, why don't I have any time? Well, I didn't have any time because you only get 48 hours in a weekend. And at least one weekend day, I was at their house, either, grocery shopping or changing a light bulb or mowing the lawn or, whatever, sorting pills, whatever it might be, just little stuff. And then in the midst of me thinking, I actually was thinking, I'm like, wow, this caregiving thing is hard. They talk a lot about in our space, how women don't self-identify as caregivers. I never had that problem. I immediately was like,
You're like,
whoa, I'm caregiving. It's
yeah.
really hard. And it wasn't even really hard yet. And then both of my parents were diagnosed with terminal illnesses on the exact same day, which is crazy. I went from one hospital to another and I got a diagnosis of stage 4 cancer and another one of Alzheimer's. And so then it was just like, all hell broke loose trying to manage these two diagnoses, trying to move my parents into the appropriate senior living facilities and trying to stay employed. And that's why I really wrote the book, because no one was talking about staying employed while caregiving or even being employed while
Yeah.
caregiving. So
When you're referencing, the parents, and we know that they're going to pass someday, and you talk about how, but we don't know what it's going to look like. Is it going to be, what's the health? Is it going to be this sprint or the marathon? Typically it is that marathon, and you kind of had it two-sided because your mom had more of that
yeah.
acute diagnosis, and your dad is more of the longer term. And I thought, as I was reading that, I'm like, gosh, that's so true. I think we think, okay, there's going to be possibly this moment or event that happens, and then we've got, a definite plan of what's to come, or it's going to be possibly quickly. And I found with my loved ones, just 10 years, 12 years, and understanding the acceptance. And for you, what was the turning point when you were like, all right, this is going to be a little bit longer, and I'm just going to settle in and be accepting of being this caregiver right now?
Yeah, it was this one afternoon when right after the diagnoses, and I had moved my mom to a assisted living near me, and I was meeting with a hospice nurse because my mother opted not to have any treatment at age 84, stage 4 cancer. So we were interviewing hospice nurses to see if she was a candidate for that level of care and support. And I was having, really bad day, woke up stressed about work, had to meet the lawyers in the city later that day to go over wills and, all that stuff, and just stressed. And so in a really bad mood. And then when I got to my mom's apartment, she was in a bad mood, mother-daughter tension, it was just like, and the whole time I was just like, I can't do this. I'm not up for this. I don't have time for this. I didn't plan for this. I'm not the best suited daughter for this. I have 2 sisters. So really in this like stage of resisting all of it. And this hospice nurse came in, and she really pissed me off because she started to explain what the process would be. And in explaining it, I heard the assumption that I would be in my mother's apartment pretty much around the clock, because at the end of life with cancer, there's, this administering of medication, the comfort medications that require someone to be there, and that assisted living facilities can administer because of, the way they give out pills and all that good stuff. And in hearing her and realizing that she just assumed I would be there and not knowing anything yet about cancer care, so being surprised by that, I was really angry that she would make this assumption. So I asked her to step out in the hall, and I pretty much told her I didn't like her, which is really not my style. And then I burst into tears because I was just feeling so bad about all of it. The way I talked to her, the way she talked to me, everything that was going on. And this woman, she's actually the woman I dedicated the book to. She was so phenomenal. She just really heard me and saw me and said, okay, I get it. And parceled out for me all the different parts of my life and what needed to happen and what could take a back burner and what couldn't, and gave me, a pep talk about how I was really well suited to do this. I could do this for my mother. By doing this, I was modeling for my children what unconditional love would look like, which totally gets me every time I think about that. And all of a sudden I realized, like, okay, 1, I'm not alone in this. And 2, there's a plan. And 3, yeah, you can. So you might as well just stop fighting it and do it. And so that was my moment of acceptance.
She's an incredible example of how to show up in care for people.
She really did. Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
and you sharing then that with all of us, I think, as people that not only work in the space, but with families, understanding that we can also be that for somebody too, and just provide a little bit of that, reference point. And it just shows too the need for support. I think she kind of laid out what all you need to consider, and our choice and agency in caregiving. I know you talk about that. You mentioned going from victim to boss. What did that mean for you?
Yeah, well, it was pretty much the same thing as the acceptance, in that before I accepted that this is my life now, this is what I'm going to do, and I can, I was just in a massive pity party, martyr mode. Like, I can't believe this is happening. This, why me? It should be my sisters, all these things. I'm too busy at work. I'm not suited for this, da, 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 da. And that sucks all your energy. And I think caregiving is an energy game, right? I mean, it requires so much of our energy to balance, well, to show up as caregivers, to balance all the crazy emotions that go with it, right? We're looking at our parents' mortality, which makes us look at our mortality. We're thinking about, shifting roles, like our parents aren't the ones that we rely on for everything now. Now they rely on us. What does that mean? Blah, 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 right? So it's just, and you're grieving the loss of your childhood, the loss of your parent. I mean, it's just, right? It's a wild mix of emotions. So, and then, you're putting the kids to bed or looking for soccer cleats or trying to stay employed, whatever it might be, right? So I really feel like as much as we can manage our energy and let go of the negative emotions to the best of our ability, it just helps us so much. So for me, when I just said, okay, stop fighting this and accept this role. And when I stopped thinking about why aren't my sisters doing as much as I am, and started to look at it more from a perspective of, well, you're doing 10 things today versus there two because you're really good at this, Liz. And like, I mean, it really was kind of self-centered, the work that I did for myself about like really giving myself these talks about how amazing I was.
Yes, you had
And it
to, yeah.
helped me. And I really encourage other caregivers to do that. Like when you're brushing your teeth at the end of the day or in the morning, like make eye contact and be like, you are showing up. And that's why I like to frame caregiving as a choice. Sometimes people get really upset with me, like, Liz, do you think I chose to have my mother move in with me, or for her to have a terrible fall, or for my dad to get dementia? Of course not. But we are choosing to show up. I mean, technically, we could run away, right? And so the people who aren't, even though they might feel put upon and like victimy and martyry, is that a word? Like I did, we're still making a choice to show up and care for somebody to the best of our ability. And I say, like, wow, you're amazing. And no one else is probably going to tell you you're amazing. So go ahead and tell yourself.
And like, the whole idea too that I think we feel better about ourselves. Like, and I'm trying to articulate this, our self-esteem when we're not just in victim mode, but we can say, I know, like you said, like, I know I'm smart. I know I have the skills. Like, building upon that and saying, like, rather than like the world's taking advantage of me, right? And I get sometimes we have pity parties when we're in it. We're like, this
I'm a
sucks.
huge fan. You just have to,
Yeah.
like, I write about the book. You just have to, like, honor last call and like
Yes.
shut down the party at the right
Totally,
time, but you can't have,
totally. Yeah,
yeah.
just like get it all out and then be like, okay, no, like I'm gonna have the self-esteem to pick myself up and move forward and take that choice in it. And part of those negative emotions um, is in caregiving, we think of like the physical tasks that we have, like, and you talk about like the tactical challenges, right? We're giving medication, we're helping with transferring or using the restroom and things like that. But such a big part of it is all of the emotional dynamics, I think, is like almost more so that comes up in the complicated relationships. I know in my family we have complicated dynamics at times.
I've never met a family that
Yep,
doesn't.
I know.
Maybe the Brady Bunch, and even they did a little
Right,
bit.
right, I know.
See,
And the dysfunction that surfaces, not only like what we're overcoming in our childhood, but siblings and all of it. And how do we, that's one thing I loved that you talked about was we take that negative and then you mentioned redefining the relationships.
yeah,
What does that
yeah.
look like?
Oh, I think that's really important. One of the things we hear in this space all the time is that I'm now parenting my parent. I actually don't like or subscribe to that phrase.
Right, I'm the same
Um,
boat. Yeah.
Because one, I don't like to make our parents seem like children because they're adults who live their whole life and they deserve to be treated like adults. And who are we to say that adulthood only looks a certain way up to like age 70 or something? And then after like 70, 75, that's something else. Well, that's adulthood too. I mean, the person who is becoming an invalid or has cognitive decline, they're still an adult. Like, I don't think we get to just shape it as midlife is what it looks like, and after that it's something different. So anyway, and and it's their life, not ours. We're just a part of it. So anyway, that's important to me. And I also think it's just healthier if we start to think about this as something different. When we're kids, we have a child adult relationship with our parents. And when we're adults, if we're lucky, I always say, then you move to an adult adult relationship. There are some dysfunctional relationships where the parent never wants the child,
Yep.
to see the child like an adult, or the child never wants to act like an adult. But
Mhm.
in more healthy relationships, then you get to have this beautiful adult adult relationship with your parent. And I have a 20-year-old now, and I have, we're starting to have an adult relationship, and it's really nice. So maybe there's another phase that we just haven't come up with a name for yet. That's, and an adult, older adult, or an adult, I don't know. But rather than thinking about it as this role reversal, which I don't think is fair to the adult and doesn't really quite define it, I think it's important just to think, okay, I'm moving into this new relationship with my parent. I don't know what it is. And by not having an expectation around it, then we're not necessarily going to be disappointed in it as well. You know what I mean? Like,
It's almost like showing up with curiosity for the person that they are now
yes,
and the person that we are now, and just enjoying it in the way that it exists in the moment, I guess is,
exactly.
yeah.
Because I think it's expectation, right? That
Mhm.
ruins our day.
Mhm. Yeah, it does in many different
Uh,
circumstances.
Wake up in the morning, look in the mirror, like, wait, I was going to be younger and thinner today. Damn, I'm in a
Yeah.
bad mood, right?
I know. I know. That's so true. We always have that, like, my family, it's like how we want to spend a Saturday, and we all have different expectations on how we want to spend that day. And so we've
Yeah.
started, recently being like, what's your expectation for how you want how you want to spend the day, and just get an idea, so I'm not like, I thought we were, I don't know, cleaning all day, and everyone else was not on that page. So,
Right.
regardless of, of what it is, I think that
It's
can be, yeah, so helpful. And when we're in the marathon part of it, it's planning over time, and you referenced it's really an energy game, not game,
yeah.
but energy. Like, where do we conserve our energy? Where do we expend our energy? And so, how do you find that we are able to easily more determine where we give our time, where we give our energy?
Yeah, I think it's really important that we think about it and we make some choices. And so I like to use this process of defining like what's most important to me every few months, years, whatever. It's usually probably more few months. Like, right now I'm not in an active caregiving role, knock on wood. So I have the ability to really focus on working daughter. And that is one of the most important things to me. I'm also, just a couple years post caregiving. So my health is also really important to me because I'm making up for some time where it took a back burner. And I'm thinking about, that, I can see my future of being elderly. So like, what do I have to do now? So for me, like those two things are top priorities over almost anything else. And so that allows me to kind of think about the long game and where I put my energy and really not sweat the other stuff to some degree, like, and all along, I mean, I wrote about this in my first book. I've never really sweated housework. I just never really cared so much how the house looked because to me, it's like the least important place to put my energy when there are so many other things that I'd rather do. Some people might be interior designers or interior photographers or entertain all the time and they love that and that's okay, and so they scrub their kitchen floor. I don't. So it's going to be different for all of us, but I think if we go through the exercise, what are the most important things in my life right now, and then really working at letting the other stuff just slide. And so where that showed up for me in caregiving too was, I talked a lot about carrying this resentment towards my sisters, feeling like I was doing everything and they were doing nothing, which A, wasn't really true. It was my perception. But B, at one, I don't really know what the shift was, Nicole, but I remember feeling so much resentment, like, you can physically feel it sometimes. And knowing that that's the kind of stuff that leads to illness, just like Liz, you need to find a shift. And my shift was partially, like I'm doing it because I'm good at it and I'm going to go there. And partially like what they're doing is not worth your energy. Your energy has to go to what you're doing. And so that's where I think the long game, long-term energy game comes in. Like what really matters? And if there are people who are pissing you off, Are they in those top areas of concern? And if not, be mad. You have the rest of your life to be mad at them if that's what you
Yeah.
decide to do.
Yeah. That's like such a good reminder, and giving ourselves permission that it's going to look different from everybody else's, right? Like, what is my priority to me,
Yeah.
and not being concerned about what anyone else is up to and letting it go. Yeah.
Yeah.
Just that good reminder. The support, and a big part of that and a big part of your work is really with the workplace and your work life and businesses, and how that is such a challenge for a lot of us as we want to maintain our careers, but we're typically the first ones that have to let it go. And a
Yeah.
lot of those businesses are lacking in elder care benefits tremendously. Why do you think that is?
I think it's because you don't see caregiving. I think that's a part of it. I think elder care is kind of a new trend. And I know that sounds ridiculous because people have been living and aging and being cared for years. But I think as sort of a workplace phenomenon, we're still in pretty early years. If you think about the fact that, women really entered the workforce in a meaningful way just in the last century, and people have only started living longer in recent years. This is what I think. I think like the working daughters of today are like those women in the 70s, brought home the bacon, fried it up in a pan, and really, wore those bow tie blouses and really forged the ability for women to work and raise families at the same time. I think we're kind of in the same place in history because, like, for me, for example, my four grandparents all died from cardiac related events. And for the most part, they all went quickly. So, and all around age 80. My dad had the same cardiac issues, so did my mother, but my mom lived to 84, and that isn't what killed her. And my dad lived to 91, and that isn't what killed. I think he had his first quadruple bypass in his 60s, and he never had another one and lived to 91. So we're living longer and therefore probably with chronic illnesses, but science is allowing us to have longer lives. Therefore, there's more caregiving going on. And then you have, both people in a relationship working, which you didn't have necessarily. If my parents had to care for their parents, my mom was a stay-at-home, right? Sure, it would have been fallen on her shoulders. So I think we're really in early days as far as like the work caregiving situation. To that, I also say, so if it feels like it's hell and you don't know what you're doing, to all the working daughters out there, there's a reason, because you're partners and you're figuring this out, and you're heroes, in my opinion. So that's part of it. I think part of it, is that it's invisible, and people tend to lump elder care and child care together when they think about workplace benefits, but they're so different. Child care comes with a timeline. I mean, assuming a healthy developing child, of course, but there's a timeline. Like I know when I'm going to roughly give birth to this baby. I have a sense of how long I'm going to be out on leave. I know when they're going to start going to preschool, kindergarten, when first grade goes 9 to 3. I know when they need well checks, and I know when to take vacation because I'll take my vacation. The elder care, we have none of that, right? We have no planning. We have no idea when to take our time off. We don't know when we're going to be needed. So it's totally different. You can see childcare in the workplace. If your coworker gets pregnant, you see it happening, right? When we were in the office, right? Or if a coworker, adopts, they're probably going to bring in pictures. I'm probably not going to be like, hey, I'm elder care now. Like, here's a picture of my sick mom, and hanging on the cube. So it's so invisible. Well, so then another part, I think, is that I think workplaces have a hard time. They hear the numbers, this is costing you $300 billion in absenteeism and presenteeism, but it's never really real to them, and it's hard for them. And they have so many other priorities. I think our HR people are so beleaguered with all the other issues they have to face. But the last part, I think, to some degree, is that most of the caregivers are women. And I think the workplace is just sadly slow to care about what they deem as women's issues.
Just like you said, forging the way that we had to do how many years ago, now we're doing it, and we have to do it in a different
Yeah.
way. Yeah. And then there's that implicit bias that is also present, and I know you reference, and having, just like you said, that panelist used the word daughter over and over again and never mentioned son, or maybe used it once or something.
No, yeah, there was a panel of
Yeah.
experts and the word daughter came up 7 times, I
Mm-hmm.
remember. And the word
Mm-hmm.
son never came up, and it was a panel on caregiving. Yeah.
Right, right.
Yeah.
And so if that is the language in our culture and what we just assume and identify with, that women take on that role and we just accept it, right? Like unconsciously that this is what it's going to look like.
Right.
Um, which we don't need to.
Nope, we don't
We
need
don't
to.
need to. We can fight against that. And just like how you were like gave yourself the pep talk of I'm good at this and all these skills that I have. What are some of those things like for women when they go back to their workplace and they can say, here's now everything that I'm able to bring to the table, like what a benefit that is.
Yeah, one of the things I always brag about or say is I was a caregiver later for my husband after the book was written, and he had cancer, and the cancer caused, so many issues. So I was coordinating the cardiology department, infectious disease, interventional radiology, oncology. Like, you show me a hospital administrator who can manage that many departments and all the paperwork and the appointment. Like, seriously, so I always say that what I like to tell employers, and it's an important message, I think, as we return to work or, refocus on work as caregivers too, is I think caregivers, I don't know why everybody isn't hiring them. I think they make the best employees. They have amazing skills. So one is management and organizational skills, like I just explained, managing all those departments or coordinating with all the departments in the hospital. That's hard. Attention to detail. We administer medications, and we know if you're sorting, 14 pills and you're worried about pill interaction, and it's not like somebody's like telling you, hey, these pills are let me look at the whole thing before I prescribe something to your parent. We're the ones who are like, okay, I'm sorting this. I can't screw this up. What's the best process going to be? And how do they interact? We're the ones going back to the doctor and advocating, like, there's some we can remove, so we're managing medication. We're learning medical skills that people, I don't think, who haven't been exposed to caregiving yet would never believe that people with no medical training are actually doing at home. That CNAs aren't allowed to do because they don't have the right qualifications and training. We're negotiating. You tell me that I can't get the first, you call for a doctor's appointment for my 91-year-old dad with dementia who, takes 2 hours to, get into the car and into the doctor's office. And you tell me the only appointment is at 1:30 in the afternoon, which means boom, there's my whole workday. And I'm like, no, I will find a way to find an opening, for 10 a.m. Like, I mean, we don't take no for an answer. We can make stuff happen. We have compassion. We have insight into, a rapidly aging society. Like, why wouldn't you hire a caregiver? I think. And all these companies are trying to figure out, the future of work and the hybrid workplace and what does flex look like? We've been doing it behind your back. You just didn't know it. So I think it's really important for working daughters to give themselves that pep talk and for businesses to think about, like, yeah, I'd hire her.
Yeah, exactly. Resilient, all of
Yes,
those things that
resilience. Oh
you
my God. Right?
all of the things that you
Empathy. Don't
just
we need more
oh
empathy in the
my
workplace?
gosh, completely, completely. How can we be involved in disrupting the system or like even at a legislative, I can't even say that word.
Legislative.
Legislative.
That's one word I can't say.
I
I can't
struggle
say
with
the other
that
one.
one. At that level, is there what can we do? Like take that to action.
So many things we can do. I think one is if you simply email mary@workingdaughter.com. We keep a list of working daughters. We call it the Working Daughters Who Care list. And every now and again, we'll send out actions like, hey, this is in front of Congress. Let's all send this template letter around National Working Daughter Day, which is the third Tuesday in November. This year we trained, I think, 10 different women on how to write op-eds for their local newspapers to raise awareness for what caregivers need and are going through. So we have our, a small but growing list that we activate around those issues, but also AARP has a great website. I think it's like AARP Public Policy or something like that, where they track all the legislation that's happening by state. And every now and then, if you get on their mailing list, you can sign up, they'll give you the whole form for letters. So I think it's so important that we pay attention to that. At the same time, I know if you're actively caregiving, you might not have time. And that's why those of us who are post caregiving, I think,
We
need
can
to
rally
step it
for
up, take
them.
that mantle.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then in the workplace, I think, asking about caregiving benefits and making sure that when your workplace talks about childcare, that you say, we also really need to talk about elder care, or, setting up like affinity groups and that sort of thing in the workplace. I think, that's something you can do in your own workplace that would benefit you if you were going through caregiving for support as well.
Yeah, it's being the voice for those that can't maybe in the moment, but thinking about for the greater good
Right.
of all of that. And I love how you talk about the power of storytelling and the story that we tell not only to ourselves but out into the world, I think also shapes people's view of caregiving or the view of the relationship with work and how we are self-reflective in what we went through. I don't know if you remember the quote that you have in the book, but I really liked that by Nora Ephron, talking about how,
Oh yeah, I have it hanging on my
yeah,
bulletin board over
it's
there.
so good. It's so good. Above all, be the heroine of your life, not the victim. And I think that's, really your mission is equipping women to use their voice to be equipped with the resources that we need and be supported. So I just commend you and I'm thankful that you're here. Where can we learn more, and maybe tell us like what all does Working Daughter do for people and women and support them in that
Sure.
journey?
Well, everything I'll tell you can all be accessed simply at workingdaughter.com. It's really important that Working Daughter is accessible to everybody. So so we have what's free is our private Facebook group, which is like really where the magic happens. And that's probably about 8,000 people now. And men are always welcome. We call them our working dudes, but we cater to women because of some of the unique, issues that women have around the workplace. But men are always welcome in Working Daughter. And so the Working Daughter Facebook group is like where you can 24/7 support from other people who are going through what you're going through so that you don't feel alone. And we vent, we make jokes, we say, today somebody was looking for dining room chairs that wheels locked so their parent wouldn't slide at the table. I mean, whatever it might be, we talk about it there. And then of course the book, which is pretty much in every library in the country, but also on Amazon. It just came out in paperback, so it's even more affordable than the hardcover. And then the website, which has thousands of articles about caregiving and care and career specifically. But then what we do is, so we have a membership site or a membership program. So some people in the Facebook group said, this is great, but because of the algorithm changing and the level of activity in our Facebook group, there was a conversation about, I don't know, dementia care, and I can't find it again. And I really wish there was somewhere. So we created somewhere. We have the members can go behind a firewall and there's all kinds of resources around care and career, care in the holidays, dementia care, you name it. And then access to coaching calls that they can sign up for. As much as they want every month. So that's the membership program. Then we do National Working Daughter Day as a day of awareness, and that's third Tuesday in November. It's pretty much been a grassroots effort to raise awareness that working daughters exist and need support. Last year, we launched the first list of best companies to work for working daughters, and we hope to see that continue to grow. Again, that's partially awareness building and partially impacting the workplace by working with companies so that they can make the list, because a lot of people came back to us last year and said, oh, wow, I could never make the list, but we're going to work on it, which is exactly what we wanted. And then our Working Daughter at Work program is where we do go into companies and we either, set up their support groups, or what companies can do, which is really easy, is they can buy the memberships for their working daughters. So you've got a group of women, you don't have the right benefits in place to support them. You can put them into Working Daughter and give them the resources really simply. And then the last thing we do, I think this is the last thing we do, is we have an Amazon store where we curate products that have only been recommended by other working daughters. So if you are looking for that, what's the best rollator that goes well over a carpet, or what are the best adult diapers that don't leak at night for an oversized man, or whatever, so, and if it's not in our store, it's because one of us hasn't tried it and said, I really like this product.
Well, and that's where the real magic happens, in those like really practical questions. I know I just got asked someone had a question about someone in their life was having trouble with bed, but they couldn't use the bed rail because they were falling, and we've
Yeah.
talked with an OT and figured out, actually, here's a really good one, so they can still overcome the issue. But I think it's questions like that that we like really have when we're in it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's so
And where do you
great.
go for those?
Yeah,
Right.
yeah, what to
Yeah.
do. Well, I'm thrilled that now we know each other and we're
Me too.
connected, and whatever I can do to continue to support the work that you're up to, and obviously excited to share with everybody in podcast world.
Well, right back at you.
Yes,
Yeah. I
yes.
mean, there's so much work for us all to do.
There is, there is. So thank you so much for sharing. And everyone's got to go read your book. And I know you've got more. I've only read the one, Working Daughter, but I enjoyed it, and I think that anyone needs to pick it up, and they'll get a lot out of it. So thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah,
Thanks, Nicole.
thank you. Thank you for listening today. If you enjoyed our episode, please subscribe and give us 5 stars. In all honesty, we'd love to hear from you. Thank you so much for listening to our episode.